From the world's most respected MMO news site, Massively Overpowered, comes a program that pits one MMO against another in a battle of wits. To the death. Welcome to Massively Opinionated. Media personalities from all over the internet come to this forum to face off in the ultimate debate. Everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion, but ours is the only one that matters. Having heard that someone was wrong on the internet, it's your host, Larry Everett.
Their ears. Racist. Hurtful.
Hey everybody, this is yes, we're recording all this right now. This is great.
Oh, great. No, I'm serious. This is good. This is gold.
I have a fetish for leg humping in Final Fantasy XIV.
It's okay. There's no judgment here. You sick, fucking disgusting, horrible. Let me finish. Offensive man. There's no judgment.
Larry told me we were in the safety nest. That everything we said here was okay. That's
everything. What all the horrible things that you say are completely all right, and no one will judge them for you sick freak.
I don't hump hard legs, though. I do have taste.
Okay, well, that makes everything okay, then.
Well, there you go. All right. All right, well, everybody, if you didn't catch who that was and who I am, I'm Larry Everett with Massively Overpowered, and you're watching Massively Opinionated. And this is going to be a fun show where we take MMO tropes and battle them against each other to the death. And today, it's going to be really special because we are talking about Final Fantasy XIV, all about Final Fantasy XIV. And if you didn't see them over there just a minute ago, we have a couple of experts on Final Fantasy XIV. First from MMO Bomb, the editor-in-chief over there. Elliot's trying not to laugh about that.
No, that's... By the way, Larry, you edit out curse words, right? In post?
Sure.
Sorry, I cut off your intro there.
Sorry, from MMO Bomb. Say hi, Mike Byrne. How's it going?
What's up, Larry? It's good to be back. And I told you, man, you gotta freaking write my resume. I get words like expert and most important people on the internet or something like that for the first episode. I was like, wait, Mike B's on the show? I didn't see Mike B. What's going on? Good to be here.
A lot of fun to have you. And also, from Massively OP, the writer of Wisdom of Nim, it's Eliot Lefebvre. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Larry. I'm, I'm doing pretty f***ing okay, I guess.
we are totally in trouble today. This is going to be an amazing battle, though. Lots of fun. I hope everybody here enjoys it, everybody that's watching. Let me first go over the rules.
All three of you that weren't offended by the language.
That's right, all three of you. First, let me go over the rules really quickly. I have sent these to 4 different questions. All of these particular questions are about Final Fantasy XIV, and they've had time to look them over, hopefully, and think about their battle strategy. And what they're going to do is they're going to answer the question and then battle against each other. And I will, at the end of the little discussion, I will decide a winner per question, and the person with the most points at the end will win the internet, or in this case, his own Lalafell or something along that line, that he can have hump legs or...
I don't need my own Lalafell. The world is lousy with them, you know. I can use them as freaking footstools, dude. I can, buy and sell as many Lalafell as I want.
I gotta go back, Larry. You mentioned you sent us an email.
What is this email?
Email. Yeah.
I think that's up by the Ash Castle.
All right, we'll wing it.
He's covering for himself, just, so when he loses all the points,
right?
Yeah, Final Fantasy. Yeah, it's a game. It's a game.
Well, it's one of the online ones. Was 12 online?
No. Was 12 one of the online?
11.
Yeah. Okay.
11? Yeah, it was.
I know.
It was 3.
I know. 7. 7 was the most famous, right? That was. I mean, that's the only one that really counts. Am I right about that?
Well, what number are we on?
I think I could be wrong, 22? But I think 36.
36. I mean, something like that. This one's the real Final Fantasy. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have not heard that joke.
Crystal Chronicles, because if it is, I'm ready to go.
All right, excellent.
I've been waiting all my life for this to be about Final Fantasy Tactics, so that one I'm not even kidding about.
All right.
Would anyone like to hear about the Zodiac War? Well, that's great. I got the charts.
All right. Well,
about this journal I kept when I was 12.
12.
No, this shit was going down a year ago. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep seeing if I can trip you up there, and then
All right.
I probably wouldn't be fired.
The first question I asked, and I started hopefully, with an easy one, but knowing these two guys, probably not. Since we think we're on tactics. What is the most universal appealing part about the Heavensward expansion that just came out? So let me go to Mike first. And what did you say is your answer?
I'm trying to mute and unmute my mic because I have a stupid book.
That's his answer. He doesn't get to change it.
All right, I mean, come on. This one's kind of easy, and I think even Elliot's going to agree here. He's not, just for the point of the damn show, but it's the most appealing part of it has to be the story. I mean, we're entering the city of Ishgard. It's a city that's been promised since version 1, and those players never got in there. It's been the Juno of 14, and we could never go in. The city has a dragon problem, which is just high fantasy nerdgasm right there. And until now, a problem with outsiders not letting anybody in. All of it just kind of sets the perfect stage for some great intrigue. Now, add on top of that, which is already pretty cool in my book. Add on top of that the events going right before the final patch into the expansion, and now you have intrigue inside the expansion and outside. And I'm not going to give any spoilers here because I know some people just started playing again, and they got to go through the story to get the expansion content. I won't give it away. Cool stuff, though. Throughout the entire 50 to 60 leveling experience, I felt compelled to read every story quest. And normally I don't. Typically I don't. I watch the cutscenes and that's it. But I found myself reading every bit of story, enjoying what I was reading. And at no point did I ignore things. And you can get through the whole thing quickly. A lot of people did. You can take your time like I did. Both feel great. You're not going to feel rushed at all. You'll do your couple of group things. No biggie. If you're not a progression rater, nobody's going to be rushing you on this because the story is that good. Your free company members want you to see it and don't want to spoil it for you. That's a mark of a freaking appealing thing. Now, you want to know what happened to the characters at the end of the last patch? And you want to push into this new territory? You got that? And you actually kind of feel awe when you walk into Ishgard that first time. Absolutely amazing to me. Hands down the most appealing part of the expansion.
All right. Excellent answer. Eliot, what would you say? How would you counter that?
I would actually genuinely disagree. And this is coming from someone who enjoyed the story immensely. I thought the story was great. I laughed. I cried. There were, characters I really related to. And you know what? I don't think that's the best part of this expansion because, I've already gotten through it twice, actually, on 2 separate characters. And you know what? The story is nice. The story only lasts you until you get through to the conclusion. What makes Heavensward so appealing is that it takes all of the aspects that were already present at the end game of Final Fantasy XIV. All of the things that you could do, all of the crafting, all of the gathering, dungeons, all of the, hunts and all the gameplay mechanics, all the class interplay, and it expands literally all of them. The story is basically what I would say in this case, a gateway drug. The story, that's what gets you in. The story is what gets you, yeah, there you go. The story is what gets you playing, and it's what engages you in the first place. And then, for one thing, you have all these individual class stories, like you have Dark Knight, you have Machinist, you have Astrologian, all of which examine some extra part of the world that we hadn't seen. You have all the continued class stories, and then you simply have you have a improved end game for crafters and gatherers with the whole script system. You have basically the same end game that you had at the end of 2.55, but expanded and improved with more ways to do content. Everything that made the game work really well beforehand, everything that made it fun before, has been polished up, improved, expanded, and you have more things to do and more fun to have. And as a result, it's very much built, I am at endgame, but I don't feel, even though I did not rush, I got through it quickly, but I did not rush. Yeah. But I don't feel like, I saw the story. I guess that's, the big thing until the next patch. No, I feel like I have tons of stuff to do until the next patch rolls around. And that would be true even if I only had one character that I brought up to level 60 on one job. As it is, I have tons to do.
Okay, so Ellie, you're saying
I would agree with that to a point. If the question were what makes Final Fantasy XIV, what's the most appealing aspect, I would agree with you. It's the things that keep you playing here. But we're talking about Heavensward, and all the things that you just pointed out totally hit the mark. They are appealing in their own rights. Particularly, you mentioned the crafting. I got to go with you. It's so much better in Heavensward than it ever was, hands down. So I agree with you there. But all of those things you pointed out, the systems, the new abilities, the new classes, those are all going to now stay the same for the entire expansion. They'll be tweaked and balanced a little bit, but you're not getting any new abilities. You're not going to get any new classes. Eventually, at some point in the series of the expansion, you will become exhausted of doing your hunts, doing your daily trials, doing your farming for tomestones of whatever type are at the point. And the story is the part of the expansion that not only kicks off well, but is going to carry, just like the original 2.0 release did, is going to carry through all of it. That story in every patch is what's going to drive the rest of this. Not saying what you're pointing out isn't fun. I love it myself. I don't disagree with a single thing you pointed out. But if I'm talking about the entire expansion, what's the most appealing? Having a kick-ass story right at the beginning and knowing that that is going to continue every major patch. I don't think you could beat that, knowing that that is what's coming up with everything else you pointed out. Once you've locked it in, you got your new rotations down, maybe you play a new class or something, then all of that turns into the regular grind until the next patch.
But I would argue that, while you're saying, yes, that's going to be your regular routine until the next patch. But the thing is that you can argue that, say, for instance, to use an obvious comparison, in World of Warcraft, it's, a regular routine between patches. In any MMO, there's going to be a regular
Unfortunately,
routine.
They have to wait 2 years. We have to wait 3.5 months.
Well, yes. I wasn't going to insert that particular dig, but we can go with. But the point is, dude.
He just duded me, Larry.
He just duded. Wow, is that like roughing?
Also,
is that
diamond is not the preferred nomenclature. But the point here is that the reason, the story is never going to take up the majority of your playtime. And, we're talking, I agree entirely. We are talking about the expansion as a whole. The story provides context. The story provides, a reason to get in there. And even if you burn out a little bit, it gets you back, but it doesn't get you back on a daily basis. It's not going to get you logging in on a regular basis. What's going to do that is, all these things that you start doing, they're fun to do in and of themselves. Oh, yeah, you're going to get bored.
Come on. I'm a white knight just as much as you are. But come on, grinding law and grinding the next tomestones eventually is not fun.
And then you can take a break. You can always take a break. The point
and you know when I'm going to come back? When the next story piece drops.
But the point I'm making here is that, you're going to be spending much more time on that than you are on the story. I love the story in 14. The story is definitely one of the high points, but I don't think that's what makes the expansion as a whole so appealing because you said, okay, yeah, these systems are repeating. These are things that you're going to be doing on a regular basis for an extended period of time. Yeah, totally true. However, the thing, you can say, okay, eventually you're going to get bored. That's true of anything. If you keep doing the same thing for a long enough period of time, you're going to get bored with it. That's just the reality. The systems and the things that have been put in. I'm still
on that point. Then
I didn't interact. I didn't interrupt you during your.
Fair enough. I apologize.
The point is that the story in Heavensward is great, but we also, if you're going to talk about the entire expansion, we don't know what the story patches are going to look like in the expansion yet. We know they're going to happen, but we don't know what they're going to look like. For all we know, it would be lying to say that every part of Final Fantasy XIV story up until this point has been spectacular, or that every story patch did not have, let's be fair here, there was some filler there. There were quests, there were sequences. Remember getting a corrupted crystal? Remember the long stretch in the 2.0 story where it was like, hey, look into rumors of the black-caped man. Oh, yeah, sorry, guess those didn't pan out at all. Those were just complete wild goose chases. Well, anyway, go kill Titan. So the point here is that, it's the joy of playing the game and all of the ways that it's improved. Yes, you're going to settle into a routine, but you have so much more to do that you can never look at the game and say, okay, I've done everything there is to do. You can say, I've done all the stuff that I feel like doing. And that's all been polished, and that's all been trimmed up, and that's all been made better. And in that regard, that's what's going to stick with you for most of the expansion, not just the period of time when you're getting through that main story.
So then what is your answer on what is the most appealing thing here? Because it seems like you're pointing out everything except the story.
And I'm saying it's the end game systems. The end game systems that are in place and are improved, and the stuff that you are going to be doing on a regular basis are the most appealing part, because, yeah, story, great, but you're only going to be there for a little while. The end game, you're going to be there for a while, and you can be there on a lot of different classes, and there's a lot to do even there.
I need to get a little fuller picture here. I think, because Mike's not wanting to spoil a lot of things, I do kind of have to, take him at his word on a lot of things, but I'll take your word on it as well. But one of the things that I'm not,
and I don't think Eliot's arguing the great quality of the story. He's just
right.
We're both in agreement there.
Yeah,
we're both in agreement. We're just about which one goes first.
And one of the, but I do want a picture of, if I could, of what activities are being, because you're saying crafting, you're saying what honestly sounds like dailies, and I'm trying to, and just using those terms by themselves are quite frankly not very appealing. And that's kind of what I'm trying to find here, is like a universally appealing thing. Why are these things that aren't necessarily universally appealing? And I'm going to take you at your word that you're right, but I'm wondering why are they appealing versus like what you see normally.
And this is kind of where I was going when I rudely interrupted you, and I apologize. Yeah. You made the comment of you'll eventually get bored with everything, and my point is you won't with the story, because it doesn't duplicate itself.
Already done.
It keeps going in the next patch and the next patch and the next patch. So if there's one thing that you won't get bored with at some point, it's the story. You're anticipating the story. You go through it. Maybe you're right. You're sad it's over and I got 2 months before the next patch, but you're still anticipating the next story and excited about it.
But at the same time, I'm saying, you can't get bored of the story because you're not repeating it. You're not doing it more than once, and you're not doing it on a regular basis. And one of the main points of an MMO is that you want to be there on a regular basis and enjoying yourself, not just clearing a quest and then saying, well, I guess I'll stop back in a couple of months. But why?
I don't know, unless you're playing World of Warcraft. I mean, that kind of seems like the thing to do.
Well, yes. Well, I guess all my Garrison followers are out doing raids. I'll check it in a couple days. Have fun, guys. But anyway,
go ahead.
For one thing, the crafting, and like, you as a crafter, you can log into the game, craft things. Never, you can. In 2.0, you had a little bit of an issue where there wasn't a whole lot to do as a max level crafter, other than just craft things, sell them, make more money that way. You didn't have a whole lot. Once you had your gear all melded, that was basically all you were doing. Whereas at this point, you have a whole system for producing items specifically as collectibles, dealing with a whole exchange system in addition to, crafting items, selling them, playing the market boards. Same thing with gatherers. You have a whole system for acquiring collectibles, turning them in, and you can do all this without ever getting into combat. You don't have to, engage in combat if you don't want to. There have been days when I've been like, you know what? I don't feel like running any dungeons. I'm just going to focus on gathering today. And I can do that. And I mean, you can say, yeah, okay, you're just running dungeons on a daily basis, but the new dungeons are well tuned. They're fun. They have interesting encounters.
And you're limited to 3 when you're basically at 60.
You're limited. Well, you're always limited. There's always limits.
But we're talking about 3.
And if you were going to be, I mean, that's been an issue with, 14 since
Agree.
Oh, if we're going to criticize it for that, we're going to have to criticize. There's always going to be some limit there. But I'd say that, aspect of it, that, this is, again, yes, they're dungeons. They're also really well balanced, really well tuned dungeons that are fun to run. And, unlike, I'm not going to pick on WoW anymore because we've already been giving it a drubbing. Unlike, let's say the Secret World. How about that? Unlike the Secret World's dungeons, they don't tend to get boring on it quickly. They tend to have enough permutations based on what classes you're bringing in there and what you're bringing and, what you're trying to gear. And of course, there's a simple fact of if you decide one day, I'm tired of, running these dungeons, I'm tired of doing damage. Okay. Play a different job. You can. You always have something to do. The end game is very much. There are a lot of games that say, okay, end game is the same thing you've been doing as you're leveling. 14 is as close as I found to a game that actually provides an end game and still says, yes, that is actually what you've been doing the whole time.
When I think of the term, you're dead on. But when I think of the term most appealing, anything, insert product here, I also think of it, if something is the most appealing, it's got to appeal to the largest portion of that product's audience. And while everything you're saying is great, the crafting stuff is perfect. That's a small set of your audience that are dedicated crafters. The PvP, not excellent. That's why neither one of us brought it up. But that is a small portion of your audience. The people that love the dungeons and the raids. And then there's the hardcore raiders. These are all little subsets. And all those things are done really, really well. But the one common denominator that is done across all of those subsets and appeals to the most people, including new people that maybe dropped out and are now coming back in large numbers, is the story.
And I would say my contention is just that what it comes down to is what comes down to me is most appealing when I'm looking at a game. I'm not looking at okay, what am I going to enjoy the most when I go through it the first time? Then
let me pose this question.
I'm still talking, dude.
This is good for you, though.
What's good for me is if I can finish a sentence. What would be good for me is if I could actually finish a sentence without you jumping in the middle.
I'm sorry, Eliot. I apologize. Carry on, sir.
The point is, what's most appealing to me is, am I going to be in, any game I can, log in, play, and, well, I finished it. In MMO, I want to be able to provide me with something fun to do on a regular basis. And, if I'm, just logging in and enjoying it as I go through the story and then I'm bored out of my mind, then that's not very appealing. It's if I know that I have something fun to do on a regular basis.
All right. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and make a call here. And oh my gosh, I think that, this is kind of a struggle because I absolutely understand both sides of this argument, and to a high degree, I agree absolutely with both sides of this argument. I mean, I'm right here, and the person that's the argument that is going to win out is just like a little bit above, and this totally falls back, kind of falls back to what I have seen work in multiple MMOs, and I think that, and I think that Mike kind of hit it on the head whenever he said that what's going to draw people back to the game, what's going to keep, what's going to entice people to play the game in the first place. And I think I'm going to have to just edge out with story, only because of that reason, because I think the broader perspective is there, and I didn't really get sold exactly on the dailies and the daily dungeons and the crafting and stuff like that being the most appealing. So point goes to Mike for the first one. Woo!
Sorry, I don't want to get fumbled on the next two.
But very good arguments on both sides. In fact, it does interest me and intrigue me. I want to see what these dungeons and this crafting and stuff is like, especially with the collectibles and stuff being able to pop up. Yeah,
Aurum Vale. Never go into Aurum Vale.
Ever.
All right, so the next question that I asked, and I'm going to ask this one of Eliot first. I asked, what is the biggest reason Final Fantasy XIV can stay a subscription game when most other MMOs have gone buy to play or free to play? And so, Eliot, I think you're a perfect one to answer this one first. So go right ahead.
I'm going to say the biggest thing that has allowed it to, maintain that status is a very, very dedicated development team that is churning out at 3-month intervals with a little, couple weeks here and there, very big content patches. One of the big things that we've seen in MMOs over the past few years is, designers being like, oh, we're going to put faster patches. But what you wind up with, and this is something I observed, especially with Guild Wars 2, there was a while there that they were saying, yep, we're putting out a patch every week. Right. But that patch contains a day of content. Whereas, 14 will, okay, you get a patch and it's about every 3 months, like I said, give or take a week or two there. There's 3 months of content in that patch, and that's if you are logging in and being very religious about it. There are people who I have seen that, very much can, if they're not, playing on a daily basis, can easily stretch one of those patches out to, 4 or 5 months worth of content because they're just not consuming it very quickly. There is a lot to do with every single update for Final Fantasy XIV. So even though, they're not advertising or offering faster patches, the design team is offering higher quality patches and a regular pace of content. So you feel like, okay, yes, I have to pay to keep playing this game, but I feel like that extra guaranteed money is going toward providing a whole lot to do on a very regular basis. So it feels like it's a good value.
All right. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Now, that's hard to argue with because you look at recent. Well, we're not going to make fun of WoW. Let's make fun of WildStar.
There's so many things.
Eliot is dead on. I mean, we heard we want to release faster, more patches. We have a thing a month, and we saw where that went. And Final Fantasy XIV launched and said, we're going to do this about every 3 months, give or take a couple of weeks each time, whether we need an extra week or we're ready to go. I'm going to be interested to see where that goes in the future, because prior to the release, they said that they had almost completed the basic framework for what they wanted to do up to 4.0. So I wonder how long the 4.x stuff is along and if they can keep that up. That aside, great point. Very hard to argue with. It is the perfect release schedule for this game with the amount of content. Hardcore raiders can run through it in a month, have their fun, and then go play something else and get that burn out of them. While people like Eliot and I might play it every day, but we're playing a little bit lesser every day, and we're getting through it at our own pace, and we're enjoying the content. And right as the new content comes out, we've finished the previous content. It's hard to argue with that, but I'm going to try. Because the only reason, at the end of the day, that this is able to maintain the subscription model, maintain it, is the IP, 100%. Of course, it helps that they've put together a game that people want to play. Yes, people want to pay the money to play the game. But honestly, it only even got to this point because of the IP itself anyway. probably helps to have a company in Square Enix that isn't really partial to free to play to begin with, right? So they aren't likely to make that transition. But in the end, this game isn't even saved from its initial way back closure unless it has the Final Fantasy name to begin with, much less launch with a subscription, be confident that they can launch successfully with a subscription, and then use Eliot's point to maintain/grow that subscription base. For crying out loud, Final Fantasy XI is still a subscription-based game. It came out in 2002, and the game's going into maintenance mode shortly, and will still carry that subscription going forward. I would expect Final Fantasy XIV to do the same thing, and a large part of that is the IP/company behind it. Yoshi P has talked about in previous interviews that in his mind, he'd rather close the game than have it go free to play. This is before 2.0 launch, when all the interviews were debating subscription versus free to play and why they would choose sub. Granted, that type of decision probably wouldn't come down to just Yoshi P, but it gives you an idea of the Square Enix mentality and the philosophy behind this IP with comments like that. Finally, as part of that, because they're Square Enix, similar to Blizzard, you certainly have an advantage with a company that is using its own money to develop its game rather than something like EA through BioWare into SWTOR. So the IP is the big unifying thing, and the company behind that IP, that's the reason it's going to stay a subscription, and it doesn't need as big a number as you think it does to stay subscription until it goes into maintenance mode, just like Final Fantasy XI.
I do want to say for people that are watching this that Final Fantasy XIV as of right now is I want to say that it is the second largest MMO that has a subscription. I want to say that if it's not that, it's pretty darn close. It's like it's number 2 or number 3. So whatever the reason behind their decision,
they keep getting funky with those numbers.
Yeah, I know.
They don't release hard numbers, but
right.
You know,
I like Eliot. Did you like the most recent one, which was over the course of its entire life, it has had a total of subscribers.
Yeah, being a little squirrely there, but the point. But to refute your points, sort of. The thing is, for starters, the question wasn't what allowed it to launch with a subscription. The question was what allows it to maintain that subscription, because you are entirely right that what allowed it to, be taken down and relaunch with a subscription was 100% Square Enix's immense bankroll. But I don't care if that, launched to a subscription base of 10,000 players. I'm pretty sure that there would have been a different discussion other than, nope, we're keeping it subscription forever, because, we're looking at what's allowed it to stay a subscription game for such a long time when realistically speaking, most other games have not managed that. Furthermore, I would say that, you're saying the strength of the IP is what is keeping it going, but I would say you actually referenced exactly what counterpoints that. Star Wars: The Old Republic. Star Wars in every way is a stronger IP than Final Fantasy, because Star Wars has iconic characters, movies, more cultural penetration compared to Final Fantasy, which just, there are everything in Final Fantasy XIV. It might reference something in the past, but it is not. Every Final Fantasy game, you are coming in on the ground floor of something new. So that IP, that name, that's what gives it a brand. That's what gives it, that recognition. But what I'm saying is that if you had the game launch, if you had 2.0 launch completely independent of that brand name, same development team, same development philosophy, same everything, just, let's say it was called, I don't know, Goobledy-Gork McWizzle online. Okay, no one would play that. But the point is that, it would still have a good shot at maintaining that subscription because of a high level of quality in the updates and a high level of consistency in them, and all that regular pace, and that regular pace of not just content, but quality content. And I mean, one of the things that I find astonishing is that every single patch contains, new dungeons, new high-end stuff, new crafting recipes, every single patch contains this. New story quests, and that's not always the big feature that is added with a new patch. Those are just, this is the bare minimum for an update. It's not, okay, our big focus on this update. Okay, I got to pick on WoW. I'm here again. I'm sorry. The big focus for an update will be, here's the new raid. For Final Fantasy XIV, it's, okay, so we have to have our raid, our, new dungeons, our new crafting stuff, our new story quests. We have to have all that. What else can we add in on top of all of that?
All right. But then take a look at Final Fantasy XI. If Final Fantasy XIV's content patches were after 4.0, we'll say they started to space out a little more, maybe contain a little bit less. There were changes to the release schedule and overall player happiness with that. You would be following the trend of Final Fantasy XI's entire arc. And the only thing, because we know it's not players, the last reported numbers were years ago for Final Fantasy XI, and it was around the 200,000 subscriber mark worldwide, most of that in Japan at this point, obviously. The only thing that prevents that from going free to play is simply Square Enix's unwillingness to let the Final Fantasy IP be associated with free to play. It's not going to happen. Even if the 14 customer base dwindles because the content patches get spaced out more, there's a little bit less in them, not so much is new, it's rehashes of other things. Square Enix simply will not let that IP convert to free to play.
See, for starters, the problem with that is that we've seen free-to-play Final Fantasy titles, various mobile titles. We know that Final Fantasy XI is getting a mobile client. We know that it's getting a mobile spin-off. So that kind of, clearly they're willing to experiment with free-to-play. And, you're saying, okay, well, the content patches got spaced out with Final Fantasy XI. One, we're not talking about Final Fantasy XI. Two, a lot of what changed with Final Fantasy XI is that it costs almost nothing for them to run at this point. And they've specifically said, here's why we can continue to do this because, we are now very much in, we have everything consolidated. We have everything running. We've long since made back development costs. So we think that, the subscription model is still the one that works best here because it would take us more time and money to convert it over to free to play and make it work as a free to play title than it would cost to continue, offering it in its current incarnation. The IP definitely influences Final Fantasy XIV. It would be a lie to say otherwise, but I don't think that's the reason why it's managed to stay subscription, especially when one of the big reasons why Naoki Yoshida was brought in onto the game was because he was more familiar with market trends and MMOs in the worldwide arena. And he was very aware from the beginning that many of them had gone free to play or buy to play. So he was brought in and he was charged not with, what his charges was make this game worth having a monthly subscription. And that's what he's done. And it's the content update and pace of them that I think has done that.
Which kind of shows you the mentality. They brought him in as a trend expert and they said, what's the trend? Free to play. No, we don't want to do that. You need to make this because, yes, they are doing the little offshoots with the mobile and stuff like that. But when it comes to core Final Fantasy numbered series, it's just not going to happen with Final Fantasy XIV. And that's because of the name. They only need, and they said this prior to even 2.0 launch, they would only need to maintain about 400,000 subscribers to make the game profitable going forward. They're confident their content gets them way above that. That's where they start making the money. Great, you're absolutely right. But the count on what they need is so low that they made this from the beginning with the intent of we will never go free to play because we're sure that our IP, and even if we extend our content releases, we can stay above that 400,000 mark.
Okay, I've got it. What's really funny is I think both of you are kind of hitting around the actual answer to this question because I don't think either one of you have the answer. So I'll go.
It really sucks to argue points of view you can agree with.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is that neither of us is,
right.
No, I'm I'm gonna make a call here. I think I'm gonna have to side with Eliot on this, only because I think he's a little bit closer to the actual answer, and the actual answer is Square Enix. I think you guys are hitting it right in the head. That is the reason. I mean, the developers of this game, the guys that are putting time into it, is the primary reason that this has not gone free to play yet. They seem to be so passionate about the game, and so you see what?
How did I not win this one then?
Because it's not.
Was that Square Enix would not do that to their IP?
No, well, I know, but
you argued it in favor of the IP.
You argued it in favor of the IP, and but Eliot was saying the same thing, though. Eliot was saying the same. This is why I think you guys were kind of like hitting around the actual answers, because Eliot was saying the same thing, that it was Square Enix that was doing it, but he was coming from it from the factor of, oh, we want to put all this content into the game because it's worth it, and that kind of. So anyway, I'm giving it to Eliot because I think that is probably the closer, because he putting that much content in there is clearly going to win people over, and I think he made a strong argument regarding that, and so I'm giving the point there. But I think both of you are just like on the cusp of saying what the actual answer was. Anyway.
I don't think it's the case that there is an actual answer.
There isn't.
The answer is that they are doing it, and it's obviously working.
Yeah, it's probably an all of the above thing. Yeah. But we are that's what we do around here. That's what this whole show is about.
So let's move on to question 3, and probably in a week we can get to 4.
That's right. So let me go ahead and go on to question 3 here, which is going to be a real fun one. And this one's going to go to Mike Byrne first. I asked, which is the most badass raid boss? And we got multiple ones to choose from. So, Mike, go ahead. What is the one that you think is the most badass?
All right, so and Eliot and I were talking about this before we started recording, is that there's so many different ways to define who counts in this list. Who is actually a raid boss? Do we go with full party 8-person? Do we go with 8-person but it has to be a raid like Coil? Do we go with primal fights? Whatever. Then there's also what defines badass. Is it the mechanics of the fight? Is it the story leading up to it? So here's what I landed on.
Okay.
I landed on Cloud of Darkness at the end of the Crystal Tower raid, the 24-person raid, the Cloud of Darkness. To me, the fight is badass for a few reasons. It's iconic, first off. If you've ever played Final Fantasy III, it's iconic. You knew who that last boss was going to be before that portion of the raid was ever released, and you couldn't wait to see how they implemented it. You just couldn't wait. It's well done. It's actually a bit of a challenge the first few times, and it's still, if you go in there and you got a bunch of people that don't know what you're doing, or people get lazy, you're still going to get hurt. Maybe not at 60 if you go in there with the scale down, but if you're playing through at the level appropriate portion, you can still get hurt in there. The story leading up to the battles was super cool, full of nostalgia and little Easter eggs along the way for those that really, really played Final Fantasy III. Now, that's not to say there aren't other epic boss battles, and I'm sure Eliot's going to have a fantastic one that I'm not going to disagree with. I just got to argue why Cloud of Darkness is better. But when you tie the nostalgia factor, throw in the ability for almost all players to be able to reach that fight, which I think is a limiting factor on some of the other raid-type bosses we might be talking about, and it just makes the most accessible, awesome fight for me at this point. Cloud of Darkness, Crystal Tower.
Okay, I'll take that. Eliot?
Well, if I had gone first, I might have picked Cloud of Darkness myself, so I can definitely say I agree. However, I'm going to say that, in this particular case, I'm going to actually go with, okay. Let me just note that I would love to go with the final boss that you fight in the Heavensward storyline, but that is just a big pile of spoilers, so I can't in good conscience do that. So instead, I'm going to go with the boss at the end of the 2.x storyline. I'm going to go with the Trial and the Steps of Faith, where you're fighting against Vsop, the dragon that is, storming the gates of Ishgard. This is, big. That's a mild-ish spoiler, but, come on, it's Ishgard. They fight dragons. This is coming. The thing is, and this is I've seen a lot of, MMO boss fights where the goal of the fight is, okay, you have to hold this boss off, or, you have to protect this NPC. VSOP is different. VSOP as a boss, you're fighting him, but he never even notices you. His focus is not on you through the entire fight. His focus is on the doors and getting the gates of Ishgard open. And every single part of there's something badass right there, that the boss is literally so huge and so powerful that he doesn't even deign to notice you while you are trying desperately to blow him up. But that's the thing, is that it produces a very different fight than anything else, because the goal is to, defeat the boss, but you have to go about it in a completely different way, because he's not going to pay attention to the tanks. He's not even, what's going to be fighting the tanks most of the time. You have to, use all sorts of environmental obstacles. You have to know the layout. You have to know what you're doing. You have to coordinate everything in this big defense against a boss that is so powerful you can't even get his attention based on what he's trying to do. He will just step on you and I think I squashed a warrior.
You have to forgive the non Final Fantasy XIV player here. What was the name of that boss again?
Exactly my first point.
Hold on. I know it was an odd name. I know it was a dragon. I'm not. I just. It's a little bit harder to remember than Cloud of Darkness. That's a little bit easier to let's be fair here.
VSOP. That's VISHAP.
Okay. All right. So I think that what I would I don't know how this would work, because Eliot did explain some of the boss mechanics of it, and I think that's clearly that adds to his badassery. So is there what's the mechanics around Cloud of Darkness, and why does that add to his appeal, or its appeal?
Her appeal.
All right.
So
to the extent that anything can be gendered.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Larry, let's go to Star Wars: The Old Republic for a minute, and let's harken back to launch and SOA. What did you think of the SOA fight the first time in there? Right. What
did I think of it?
Yeah, just in general.
I thought it was pretty cool. It was a little bit broken the first time I got it.
Cloud of Darkness is not broken. Take that feeling, because I thought the SOA fight was really well done with all these different types of things.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the easiest thing that I can relate to that I know, experienced. It was a pretty badass fight the first time you got in there, and it took a while before you beat it. Bugs notwithstanding, we'll set that aside. Cloud of Darkness exhibits all those types of mechanics. Yes, you have ads. Yes, you have AoE spots, just like what Eliot's talking about. Yes, you have an odd layout. Yes, you have very weird sucking wind mechanics. Yes, you have dream-like almost sequences along the way. It's very, very all-encompassing. So it's not that typical tank and spank, and Eliot's fight isn't either. It is a great fight. I'm going to have a point on that one in a minute that I don't like, though. You have all of the typical mechanics, plus the new mechanics that you may not have seen before, that we've talked about fights leading up to it, where Cloud of Darkness is sucking people into the maw, which is very cool. Cerberus did a little bit better, but Cloud of Darkness was pretty damn slick, too. So there's all of those mechanics that you're used to in a fight that is just full of nostalgia and great music and presentation and great story while you're doing it. It doesn't get better than that. I do love the trials. I do. The steps of faith. Fantastic. Luckily, I got in and did it before they nerfed it, because they nerfed the hell out of it very quickly after the patch. I thought it was, I wouldn't even argue with you, Eliot, if they had left it the way it was at launch, because the key element of that fight, as you pointed out, was waiting to see if you could down this bad boy before he broke those doors down. And if you didn't, that was it. It didn't matter if your party lived or not. That was the key to making that fight intense. And the way it originally launched, even very good to decent parties were getting to a point where they were at 2 or 3% and screaming into microphones and having a great time trying to get that last 2% before those doors fall. They're about to fall. Epic. I wouldn't even argue with you. I would concede the question if they had left it that way. But shortly after the patch, they decided too many people weren't able to beat this, and they nerfed it to the point where that thrill, that challenge portion of that whole experience was gone.
Eliot?
Well, first thing I would point out is that you're saying they nerfed it. I have seen parties still lose quite handily on VSAP, specifically because all they did was detune it. All they did, and this was, you're saying right after the patch came out. No, they did not do this until we had about a week or 2 weeks until the expansion launched. So you had basically they said, okay, we're detuning the fight. We're adjusting the numbers. And the thing is that every single mechanic that was there beforehand is still there. Hasn't changed. The only things that have been adjusted are the numbers. When this, you're talking about, for Cloud of Darkness, so many people get to experience this fight. If you want to experience Heavensward, 100% of the people who experience Heavensward experience the Steps of Faith. That is, that's not a, side quest that, some people are never going to see. That is something that you have to get through if you want to see the expansion content. That is a part of the story. And that is also coming at a very high intensity moment of the story. So you're saying, okay, Cloud of Darkness has all of this, story surrounding it. So does what's going on in Steps of Faith. I don't think you can really make the argument for one or the other, except insofar as Cloud of Darkness is a side quest. Steps of Faith is right along the main quest. It's right along the main storyline that you've been following all the way through. It is a part of the core experience that you're having here. Yeah, Cloud of Darkness has the benefit of nostalgia, but it only has the benefit of nostalgia if you are very familiar with Final Fantasy III, which, let's be fair here, is not exactly one of the darlings of, American release schedules, seeing as how it only got released here, I forget exactly how many years ago, but a long time after it was out in Japan. And that was only the remake version. We've never gotten the original version over here. So there are a lot of people for whom, while it is theoretical nostalgia, you cannot find a whole lot of American players who are going to be looking at this and saying, oh man, I remember fighting this as a kid. No, you don't. You don't remember this boss from when you were a kid because unless you lived in Japan. So I'm thinking, when you get right down to it, the nostalgia is there, but it's only there for a very small subset of people, versus the Steps of Faith, which you are going to have to go through, and that is the last big set piece battle in the pre-Heavensward storyline. And it is something that sets up a big chunk of what's happening once you get into Ishgard.
All right.
So that is hugely moving.
All right. Mike, final thoughts on Cloud of Darkness.
It's very easy. I don't even have to argue for Cloud of Darkness anymore. This was a dragon you'd never heard of before you got to the fight, and you have a hard time remembering his name after the fight. The fight itself, very cool. Boss himself, not so much. And that's the question.
You have a hard time remembering him. I had no problem remembering him whatsoever. And the thing, unless you'd played Final Fantasy III, Cloud of Darkness is just, why is this giant lady here, and why is she trying to blow me up with lasers? What is
and why does she have a giant maw? That's what I
you get no more. Wait, there are worms popping up. Why is she sucking down clouds of? What does any of this have to do with anything?
Anyway, I do want to make a call here, and this is okay. So just so you understand my perspective, I don't have the nostalgia of Final Fantasy III. Never actually played that game. I did play Final Fantasy games. Like I played the first one, I played 7, I played Tactics. So, but I have not played Final Fantasy III. I don't have the nostalgia there. I think it, but regardless of that, I think that the primary point of the question is just how badass is the boss. And I do think that, Mike, I do think you brought up some really cool factors of the fight itself, but the fact that the dragon just pays absolutely zero attention to you, I think that's the biggest selling point as far as how badass the boss is. So I'm gonna have to give the point to Eliot there.
Oh, I'm feeling robbed on back-to-back questions here. How do I lose when Eliot's opening statement is, if I went first, I would have taken Cloud of Darkness?
I know. I'm like,
that's the point we've been making since the beginning here. So don't disagree with the other one's point.
Yeah, it was really tough considering that he said that, but whenever he started mentioning the stuff that the boss does, or rather doesn't do,
it is.
Yeah.
So,
it really is.
All right,
so see badass miss the snares one time for land.
One time.
Yeah.
All right, so for the last question here, and this one is for maybe somebody like me who's getting into the game, maybe because Heaven's Sword came out or whatever. I asked which class and job is the best for new players, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw this one to Eliot first, since Mike went first on the last one. So Eliot, go ahead.
Well, I mean, part of it also depends. Part of the answer depends on what you are most familiar with playing, because, there are classes that are going to be very straightforward if you are used to tanking, but they're a little harder to get a handle on if you're not used to tanking. However, if I'm going to go for, the best overall class to start with for a new player, the best, new thing, if you have never played the game before and want to get a feel for it, I'm actually going to go with Warrior, which is a tank, because here's the thing. Warrior, while it is a tank, in the early levels, you have actually a fair amount of damage capacity. You have self-healing abilities, or I should say Marauder, since you're starting as a Marauder and you would become a Warrior. But in the course of leveling it, you'll get a feel for how the combat works. It's active without being too active, if that makes any sense. You get a feel for, moving around and doing stuff and taking out enemies without having to, say, deal with the insane amount of key combinations you're working with, say, Ninja. And so ultimately you get a good sense for what the combat will play like. Plus you'll be playing a tank, and a very straightforward tank to play. So you'll have an easy time getting into dungeons, getting into group content. And you'll also get a good sense of the world as a whole, so that if you decide, this tank isn't for me, or I'm more of a heal, you have resources and you have enough information to really make a informed decision if you decide, I want to change classes, since it's not really, all it means is equipping a new weapon and leveling again.
Okay. Mike, go ahead. What was your answer?
I approached this kind of the same way Eliot did. Was it kind of a twofold or a two-prong thing? Was if I was telling somebody that was new to this game a class or a job to play, what would I tell them? And also, if I was telling somebody that was brand new to MMOs entirely a class or a job to play, what would I tell them? And my answer came back the same. And I got to go with Black Mage. And yes, I play a Black Mage, but just looking at the specifics.
So what you're saying is that you're a noob. Okay, we'll go with that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
I think I would be saying Bard.
Most extra, as you're leveling through Black Mage, you're going to get the same thing that Eliot was just talking about, a feel for dodging, telegraphs, and things like that. And with most of those classes, just about any class or job, you're going to get that experience. So that's not exclusive to Warrior. Most stats that you're earning throughout the leveling process with a Black Mage, they're all going to 1. You're just putting it in intelligence. So you don't have to, if you're not familiar with MMOs, you're not familiar with what this stat does, a quick question is going to get you, throw it into int. It's not too much of an issue, and it's an easy rotation to get a hold of. However, leveling from 1 through 50, while the rotation itself isn't overly complex. It is fun. There are aspects of management to it. You have to watch what you are doing, and you'll have fun with it while feeling like you're still in control. It's not mind-numbing World of Warcraft mage a la two expansions ago, where you press the same 2 buttons over and over, back and forth. Here you're going to use about 5 to 6 key abilities. You're going to weave 1 or 2 things in over time. If you get a little more complex when you're feeling comfortable with it, great. You're going to be doing good damage, and more importantly, that's all you're expected to do. So for somebody new to the game, somebody new to MMOs in general, you're not the one that's worrying about buffing parties. You're not the one that's worried about healing. You're not the one that's worried about tanking. Once you hit 50, the rotation does get a bit more complex too. But by the time you get to that point, you know your class in and out, and it's just a retraining of some muscle memory, weaving in the new abilities. So I got to say, brand new to the game, brand new to MMOs in general, it's a fantastic way to start Black Mage.
At least until you stop playing the game forever because you die in 3 hits to everything. That's the biggest thing, is that, you're going to be... The thing is that, out of all of the classes at the low levels, Black Mage is, or Thaumaturge at those levels,
right?
Fragile, even more so than the other casters, because while Arcanist gets a pet and White Mage gets a heal, or Conjurer gets a heal, you get nothing. The only way that you're going to be able to survive certain encounters at lower levels is by getting very good at mastering the, sleep that. Okay, start DPSing this down really quickly. And while that is very fun and satisfying, it's not something that I would recommend as an introductory course to the game. It's not something that I would say, this is... But because when you're playing solo as a ranged DPS in this game, you are going to need... It is more complicated. You are more fragile. And that fragility does not simply come... Again, you said it yourself, it's not World of Warcraft, where that fragility means I can only take 20 hits instead of, 30. Here, the fragility means, I got jumped by a second thing, and I am very, very dead now. So that's where, I come back to Warrior, because, Warrior, you are expected to tank. But the tools you get to tank are very explicitly explained to you right from a low level in your class quests. And the tools you need are, satisfying. How do you hold a whole bunch of enemies' attention? Well, you use Overpower, which is, a huge wave of destruction right in front of you. That's, even if you've never played an MMO before, it's like, okay, this is kind of satisfying. I see I'm the guy in heavy armor with a huge axe, and I wave my axe, and a whole bunch of things suddenly get cut into pieces. I understand this. I get what this concept is.
I can't argue too much with your point on fragility, but I think that actually adds something to it, not takes something away. We're not talking about, I'm so fragile, if I don't figure this out, I'm not going to have fun. We're talking about you being introduced to abilities like sleep, and then your basic rotation. It teaches you as the player to survive for yourself, and which later in the game is nothing but a benefit for your healers when you have somebody that's good at looking out for themselves and surviving. My only downside with Marauder/Warrior is that you are introducing somebody that's new to an awful lot of things at once, and they don't really get better over time. You're going to have the whole aggro thing where if somebody's not introduced to or new to an MMO, that's a whole, or enmity, depending on what game you're playing and what the hell you call it. That's a new concept, and not one that's readily understood by somebody that's brand new to MMOs, particularly when you just throw them into a tank role. When you get to the first dungeons of the storyline too, tanking is not exactly the easiest thing to do because you don't have that ability set yet that you're talking about. And so it gets a little frustrating in there for your very first core PvE content that is done in a group. That could be a little bit of a turnoff. And also the Marauder Warrior debate on strength and vitality is going to go on until the sun sets. And so if you're not doing active research outside of the game, you may not know how you want to build your character as you're leveling, and if you're even building it the way your team is going to want you to do it, if you're going to take part in that game. I like the idea of start with this. It'll give you a core idea of the mechanics, how to survive. It's easy on the stat allocation because you're only interested in one thing, and while that may be two-dimensional gameplay, and we would probably both agree on that aspect, it's also very easy and accessible to somebody jumping into the game for the first time.
However, I would point out that, okay, there's the strength versus vitality debate for warriors is largely based on, back before the expansion when strength had an effect that it does not have anymore.
Right.
And, that was always one of the, basically anyone you asked would say, unless you are max level with a certain level of gear, if you are putting your stats in anything but vitality, you are doing it wrong.
But
you can argue that, maybe there's some confusion, but no more confusion than there would be for someone looking at Black Mage. Well, let's see. Piety increases my MP. That's important. That's my resource. I want more MP. So again, I would argue it's not that much more straightforward. Furthermore, you're saying, okay, well, you don't have that full skill set for, keeping threat. You do. You have your defensive cooldown. You have your AoE threat. You have your, threat combo. You do have your full tool set. You don't have all of the abilities that you can have, like on a warrior. You're not going to have, for instance, provoke, flash, second wind and stuff like that. But you don't need those things for, the basic level of tanking. You do not need them for the basic level of tanking. And if you go into and I think we can agree, if you go into a dungeon in 14 and say, look, I'm new, I don't know how to do this, 80% of the community is going to say, okay, yeah, that's fine. Well,
Oh, yeah.
So I think, and I think that's important to note too, is that the community is welcoming enough that, if you're starting new and you're like, I really don't know what I'm doing, this is not, again, where okay, kick the tank can't pull. It's going to be, okay, here, do you need any refreshers? Again, you're taught what you're doing, and you feel like right away, for your first storyline dungeon, you're important. You have a big role. Even though you're new, you are important. You're playing a role that other people can't play. And the first dungeon, Stastasha, yeah, there are some complexities for tanking, but not many. And that's the whole point of everything in 14, is it's introducing you to it piece by piece and bringing you up to speed so that you can then make a decision about, yeah, this is fun. I understand what I'm doing here.
Yeah, and you have the correct skill set to initially pull at these low levels. The problem is the core mechanics of the tank. You don't have those abilities yet. You make an initial nice pull, an initial AoE aggro pull. You get your cooldown going. But the minute that Black Mage or that Bard... that Bard pulls hate. I'm sorry. The minute
the joke here, Larry, is that bards do where other classes are DPS. Bard is more like damage per hour. Come at me,
you
Bard.
Don't have the ability to come at me, Bard. You don't have the ability to counter those things. You have to wait for a cooldown initially, and that can be extremely frustrating. And you yourself said the first dungeon does have tank complexities. Larry, the real answer here is any damn class you want. The game is very good at teaching you all of these classes.
Then why are we even having this debate, dude?
Thaumaturge, it's Thaumaturge Black Mage all the way. If we're just going to limit it to those two.
I'm just going to note, he plays a Thaumaturge. Black Mage is a main. I do not play a warrior main. So, let's just throw that out there.
Okay, I think
I've been accused of Black Mage favoritism.
So
I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm pointing out relevant points of data here.
I think what I'm going to have to go ahead and make a call here, and I'm going to go with Black Mage, and the reason being is that the initial, although you did there's two things that really lean me this direction. Is because number one, it's DPS, and generally speaking, DPS is a little bit easier to get a handle on, at least initially, as to how to handle things in game. It's I would have liked to have maybe heard something like, oh well, tanks are easier to get in groups, or something along that line. If that was a valid argument, maybe it's not.
It is,
and
of course it is, Larry.
Yeah.
You know,
I figured as much. I didn't want to, but I didn't want to assume.
Tanks are everywhere. Don't be.
I didn't want to assume. But
Larry, you're not dumb. We both know this. Don't pretend.
So and the other thing is, and it was the initial thing that Mike said. Man, I really wish that you would have jumped on it, Eliot. Was the meta for it? And I know you mentioned vitality and strength, but that is there. And Mike said, well, all you have to do is do this. And that was it. And I didn't really catch that same feeling, I guess, from the warrior side of things. Anyway, I'm giving the point to Mike. But what that means is that we are in like sudden death now. So I have a question for you guys that neither one of you have seen. So there's absolutely zero preparation for this. So that the audience is aware going into this what the stakes are. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out the question here. There are two answers to this question. And the first one to call out the answer. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of lag here with the internet and stuff, but I think we'll be fine. So and the first one to answer the question gets whatever answer they get. If you happen to call the same thing. If you call two different things, then it doesn't really matter. The person that calls out first actually just gets to go first. And I'm going to give you like 1 minute to make your argument. Okay. And then the first person will make their argument for a minute. The next person will make their argument for about a minute 15. And then the first person will be able to rebut anything that was said by the second person for about 15 seconds. Okay.
All right.
Sound good? All right.
Sounds good.
All right. So here is the question. All right. Square Enix gets an influx of money, but only enough money to allocate it towards one department out of these two departments. And which one of these departments do you throw money into that to make the game better? And the department is the art department or the writing department? Go.
Writing department.
I'll take art.
Okay. All right. So Eliot, go first. You got 1 minute here.
Okay, this is really easy because if you look at the art, if you look at this game, if you look at the graphics, I can, if you want, I have a whole folder full of screenshots. This game is freaking gorgeous. The art department, sure, always can improve it, but the art is already fucking top notch. Oh, sorry, I didn't say it again. The point is, the art is gorgeous. It is a beautiful game. The writing, though, because, there's a certain point where if you improve the art anymore, you're just going to improve the hardware requirements. Whereas the writing and making these characters pop out more and making these class storylines stand out more and making all of the various background elements that make this world so resonant stand out more, that's going to get you more returns because you can display that no matter how good your graphics card is.
Okay. You actually had a little bit of time left, like 15 seconds if you want.
Okay, let me start looking through my screenshot. 3 or 4 that I took just today.
All right. Mike, go ahead. What is your argument for art department?
Yeah, I wouldn't actually mind seeing them spend some money in art because I don't look at the art as just improve the graphics or just improve the texture or just improve the resolution. Yeah, those are all things they certainly could do with the possible constraint of graphics card power, maybe limiting their audience. And I don't think they'd be dumb enough to do that. They do have a nice engine. So that's not a concern. I think they would use the money more towards tweaking and polishing things like the art animations, the art effects, those background things that really immerse you in the game. There's nothing more immersive than that throws me out of my immerse immersion, thank you,
Immersion.
God, then my famous Black Mage slide, which is I'm almost done casting this ability as I run and my character locks into place and just slides. I think the money could be spent there. And Eliot and I have already agreed that the story in this game is phenomenal. There is no reason to think that that's going to stop anytime soon. Okay. So while writing would help, sure, art.
Right. All right, Eliot, 15 seconds if you have anything to rebut real quick.
You're going to talk about, fixing animation issues. You're going to talk about minor things, but that doesn't need a big infusion of cash. If you're going to talk about what needs a big infusion of cash, it's making more big stories, more big ornate stuff, crafting lots of stuff. And I'd rather see that than, a couple animation fixes. Okay.
Wow. Gosh, I hate it being down to sudden death, but it's been a really great show. I think as much as I am an artist myself, I'm going to have to go with the writer on this one, just because of the last thing. It is gorgeous art. We know that Final Fantasy XIV has some wonderful artwork, and just the set pieces are just incredible. Environmental art is great. So I don't want to down that at all. Anyway, so Eliot wins the internet for this week. Yay. And so Eliot, the prize for winning that, besides winning the internet, is you get to go first in plugging what you have going on the internet. So go ahead. Yeah, what do you got going?
I got my stuff on Massively Overpowered. I write Wisdom of Nim. I also write Perfect 10, The Wow Factor. So, I write for, I'm a news writer. I do a lot of stuff on Massively Overpowered. I also work as a script editor for Curse. I have a weekly feature on guilds going over on Game Skinny. I have the regular half of the regular Shaman column over on Blizzard Watch. I do lots of things. I feel like I should have kind of gone with a Metalocalypse style Dr. Roxo thing here, but I'm assuming you're yeah. I do cocaine. I also have pain. I do crystal meth. And I do heroin. I do it all, baby.
Wow, that's almost too good. That's kind of scary good. All right, Mike Byrne, where can we find you, and what have you been doing around the internet?
You can catch me over at the MMOBomb.com for all the free-to-play stuff. I'm editor-in-chief there, so I get to keep Jason Winter busy. Keep writing, Jason! And I do a little bit on the old Twitters there at MagicMan1, MAGICKMANN1, occasionally appearing on State of the Realm with Mr. Happy, where we talk about Final Fantasy stuff. And Eliot, kudos to you, sir. Well played. Big fan of all of your work. It was a pleasure to do this with you today.
Thank you. Always happy to meet people from the 14-iverse. Oh, right. I should also, although we're on a little, I should mention that I also am one of the co-hosts of Chocobo Dash, which is a regular 14 podcast that we've been on a little hiatus recently, just because my co-host, she has been moving across the country, so she's been a little up in the air. I forget all the things that I do. I don't remember. Seriously. One time I found out I was writing a column for a site. I didn't even realize it. I had apparently been blacking out and just cashing checks. I was just getting checks. I was just cashing. I didn't know what they were for. I just knew they were money, and I could use that money to, to buy cocaine!
All right, if you want to catch more of my stuff around the internet, you can follow me on Twitter at Shadow, SHADDOE. Of course, I write. Unfortunately, I really don't do anything Final Fantasy XIV related, so I won't share all of the stuff that I do. But I do write on Massively Overpowered. You can catch me there, and you can catch he put that in quotes. You didn't see that, but I also do the weekly comic. Sword and Board, which features this guy right there, and on Massively Features. That's right. And and if you want to follow Massively Overpowered, you can follow them on Twitter at MassivelyOP. We are on YouTube as well, obviously at youtube.com/MassivelyOverpowered, and then also catch Also, catch our Twitch streams on twitch.tv/massively overpowered. And I'm sure I'm missing something somewhere here, but I've totally lost control of the show. So I will thank everybody that's been on the show. Thank you, Mike Byrne. Thank you, Eliot Lefebvre, and thank you everybody that's watching. I will catch you guys next week. Goodbye.